Anniversary is a new action-adventure game starring Lara Croft that's inspired by the original Tomb Raider 1 that came out in 1996.
We spent a lot of time really being careful about the choices that we made about what we wanted to include and what we wanted to change and what we wanted to keep, so that we could make a game that was both sort of fresh and interesting to people who hadn't played it before, but also wouldn't sort of tarnish the memory of the original game for those that had experienced it.
The things from Tomb Raider 1 that we thought really worked, that we wanted to revive, were the sense of exploration and adventure and sort of isolation. That was extremely appealing to people. It made them feel like they were adventuring on their own. It features the same locations as Tomb Raider 1 and suggests many of the same areas and puzzles, but with a modern game sensibility.
They're all back. We've sort of gone through and given them huge polishing from what obviously existed in Tomb Raider 1. Our environments are incredible. Like, if you compare the environments in Legend to the environments in Anniversary, you can see a huge sort of step up graphically and visually. The wolves, the bears, the bats, they're all back. Bigger, badder, scarier.
We really tried to focus the game on Lara and make it about her action.
I think for fans that enjoyed the gameplay in Legend and are looking for more experience along those lines, I think it's definitely something that they're going to enjoy.
My name is Charles Fallman. I am the composer of Tomb Raider Anniversary Edition. Being a composer in the games industry is a very delicate task because on one hand you gotta bring experience from the movie media and really integrate a lot of experience of that, but you also gotta understand how the game operates. One of the sort of nostalgic factors we wanted to play on was related to the reveal sound in the first game. You have this wonderful vibraphone kind of sound for all the reveals we just had to get in. The original goal was to go back, listen to the original music, being faithful to the original soundtrack, but still evolve it. In Trey, we wanted only to use a symphonic orchestra and really just being very traditional in the sense, so the four main levels each have a classical setting and they have different kind of themes and so forth, but the whole thing is classical and very traditional. You have the whole symphonic orchestra. You got strings, you got brass, you got woodwinds, you got percussion, you got the choirs, which is sort of the typical setting for doing these type of scores. I think more importantly, it's not so much about the instrumentation, but what you can really expect to hear is the themes. We got all the thematic material from the original games. The choirs are back, even though I've modified them somehow. I think some of the music in Egypt had an interest to me. There's a sort of typical way you score Egyptian music, and it's not really Egyptian, it's Persian. People don't know that, but there's certain scales you use in Persia. Another thing that was really important was for the cinematics. All the cinematics are very sort of in a classical, typical orchestrated sense. In Legend I used way many different things, combined them electronica and like jazz and weird kind of stuff. But this one is super classical, that all the cinematics are just completely orchestral like the game as a whole.
The soundscape for Tomb Raider Anniversary is different from Legend in that it's an evolution, and it's a lot more varied and a lot more detailed.
The goal in creating the audio environment was really to try and sell the area where you were.
Different games have different themes and different tones. For Tomb Raider, we wanted really an epic, adventurous feel. It's different from the original Tomb Raider in that the original sounds were very basic. At this point now, we can do things that the original couldn't. We have thousands more sounds than the original had. The average Lara animation probably has about as many sounds as the entire original Tomb Raider. You want those big dramatic effects and that kind of classic adventure feel. You really need to do a lot of processing and combining. Without audio, things seem dead and repetitive.
All you're doing is seeing a location, and hearing it puts you in there and makes it more believable.
People tend to think the game looks better the better the audio is. We're not pulling punches. We're trying to go for the full glory. We're trying to, give the player just this really satisfying experience.
Tomb Raider Anniversary was influenced by the original Tomb Raider, mostly in terms of some of the more logic puzzles. The original Tomb Raider had a lot of puzzles where it was sort of like pull a switch, open a door, and then you'd get through that door, and then you'd come across another door, and you'd have to find a switch or a key to open that door. And so in Anniversary, getting around that was kind of a difficult thing to maintain the original feel.
What we tried to do in Tomb Raider Anniversary was to move away from relying upon those sorts of mechanics too frequently, and to allow the player, through the use of our physics system, to get more directly involved in what they were doing. We've had to take a whole new look at how we approach the design of our puzzles, provide interactions which are much more visible, much more intuitive, that resonate more with the player and give the player more a chance to feel that they're actively imparting into the steps that solve the puzzle.
The fundamentals of a good puzzle are something that's really easy to pick up and really easy to learn how to manipulate, but difficult to master. In Tomb Raider Anniversary, we're trying to make puzzles that are easy to understand. You see all the parts laid out in front of you, and you understand what needs to be done, but it's just a challenge to sort of put all the pieces together and figure out how you're going to accomplish that.
A puzzle needs to be identifiable. You need to be able to tell that the puzzle's there and what you need to do. Mainly because if you can't identify the puzzle exists, then you've already failed.
Things I think about when I'm designing a puzzle are always the end user. I'm always trying to put myself in the position of the player and try to figure out how would they go about solving this puzzle. I hope people really enjoyed Tomb Raider Anniversary, and hopefully it will live up to people's expectations. It's been a franchise that's been around for 10 years, and hopefully it will keep going strong. So hope people enjoy it.
The whole approach was to try to respect the original.
Everything is geared around trying to recreate that feeling from Tomb Raider 1 of exploring abandoned places, ancient places, finding something secret that other people have not seen for a very, very long time.
I think if people played the original, they'll feel like this is close to the original, even though if they actually went back and looked the two side by side, they'd be very, very different.
And trying to get that special feeling is not just about one part of the art, it's about the whole look and feel. And it's about the palette and the tones and the lighting and the atmosphere and the sound and the way that the design is laid out.
So the process was we would go through and we would make things not colorful. We would light things so that they were desaturated. When you looked at it with the desaturated lights, things looked a lot more realistic. And then we would go back at the end and add color with, overgrowth, flowers, and vines.
We've really upped the scale a lot. That's probably been the biggest thing. Everything is more grand, more vast, just giant compared to the original.
It was the introduction of the game, and I think it does a good job of getting you in the mood. You have a sense of mystery and adventure, like you don't know what's going on, you have to explore all these things. And even within Peru, it changes so much.
So it goes from a very snow-covered landscape to a more lush, green environment, and then into a dusty temple.
Greece in particular, we went for a cool, dark, underground feeling because it's the whole fiction of that level is that it's hidden in the mountain. And then Egypt, we tried to go for the hot, glaring sun, contrasting with the coolness of ancient hidden temples.
A lot of areas start out very sort of murky and get bright as you go up. There's a lot of areas where we wanted things to be really mysterious, so towards the end of Egypt things get really sort of dark and mysterious, and then they get bright at the end.
And then Atlantis is volcano, hot, fantasy, and it's completely different to the other three settings. So it's a nice way to round off the game.
The original Tomb Raider story was basically Lara Croft being hired by Jacqueline Nadler to go after the Scion of Atlantis. You see. That story is still the same in Anniversary. We just built more emotional resonance into it. Basically, in Tomb Raider 1, we just had to tell a story as quickly and efficiently as possible. So there was no real time for anything that was actually important in storytelling. Things like motivation and how do they really react to each other, what effects do they have on each other, and all of these sorts of things we just didn't have time to explore. So in Anniversary it was very much going into the whys. Underneath the whole idea of the story of the original Tomb Raider was the proposition that all of the ancient civilizations are linked together, that they all have so many similarities that they must have actually been birthed from the culture that came before that we just simply don't know about yet. Lara Croft was originally designed to be just this extraordinarily steely, frightening woman who was just capable of doing anything in order to achieve her goals, basically an unstoppable force. And then I wanted that kind of madness to be sort of contained behind a facade of extremely proper Britishness. Essentially, the story of Anniversary is about how far Lara will go for her obsessions. What makes Lara different in Anniversary from Tomb Raider 1 is that she actually has somewhat more to her. Now she's hard and she's driven because she has a purpose in life. There's been a real effort to be as careful as possible with it and as respectful as possible with the original, and still improve on it as much as possible. So hopefully people like it.